Welcome to the 9th DISG webinar titled Japan's New Initiatives, AJIF and AETI for Starting New Economic Relationship between Asia and Japan. Today, our participants will share expectation for Asia-Japan Investing for the Future Initiative and Asia Energy Transition Initiative and overview of AJIF, AETI, and a variety of programs under both initiatives. The time schedule for the webinar will be announced in Jakarta time. Opening remarks will be given at 9 a.m. by His Excellency Satvinder Singh, Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN for ASEAN Economic Community. And from 9:05, presentations will be given by 3 speakers from METI Japan. Mr. Ikeya Iwao, Director for Asia and Pacific Division Trade Policy Bureau, METI Japan. Mr. Abe Ichiro, Director for Trade Promotion Division, Trade and Economic Cooperation Bureau, METI Japan. And Mr. Kobayashi Izuru, Deputy Commissioner for International Affairs, Agency for Natural Resources and Energy, METI Japan. And for your information, you can scan these QR codes. The QR code on the left side is for DISG website, and the QR code on the right side is for subscription to AMEC and DISG newsletter to get our latest activities and information. The webinar will start shortly. Please wait for a moment until the webinar starts. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Welcome to our 9th webinar of the Dialogue for Innovative and Sustainable Growth DISG webinar series. My name is Ayumi Kautila-Tada from DRC Secretariat. I'll be your MC and moderator for today's webinar. Today's topic is Japan's new initiatives, AJIF and AETI, for starting new economic relationship between Asia and Japan. We believe that it will be a good opportunity for you to listen to today's presentation of the key persons from the government sectors of ASEAN and Japan. There will be a Q&A session after all the speakers' presentation. If you have any questions, please send them to us via Q&A box, and we will do our best to answer them in the Q&A session, both the question you asked in advance when you registered and the question you will ask in the Q&A box. So please feel free to raise your question for today. First of all, we'd like to invite His Excellency Satvinder Singh, Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN for ASEAN Economic Community, for opening remarks. So Mr. Singh, please.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ayumi. Your Excellencies, fellow speakers from METI Japan, a very good morning to all of you, especially a very good morning to all our participants from Japan and ASEAN. First of all, I want to thank METI for inviting the ASEAN Secretariat to be part of this platform this morning. It's really good to be part of this webinar that's going to be talking about innovation and sustainable growth. These are, of course, two very important critical areas which are very much core of the ASEAN's own post-COVID recovery. In fact, I'll be spending a little time this morning covering some of these aspects from the ASEAN perspective in my speech. But first, let me start by commending the government of Japan on the new Asia-Japan Investing for the Future initiative that was announced last January. This Asia-Japan Investing for Future initiative truly aims to enhance the ASEAN competitiveness by improving our region's supply chain capacities through the sharing of innovative solutions in digital and sustainability, and also attracting the right investments. We in the ASEAN We welcome, especially at this critical stage of the post-pandemic recovery, this initiative, as well as right now, we are working towards building back a much greener, a much better, and a safer world for our people and our nations. The Asia-Japan Investing for the Future initiative resonates very well with ASEAN's own sustainable growth agenda, and it amplifies, for example, Japan's support for sustainable growth and carbon neutrality initiatives for ASEAN. One of it I can think of, for example, is the ASEAN Energy Transition Initiative, or the AETI, that was announced last year. All I can say is that such initiatives, they demonstrate the deep relations between ASEAN and Japan. And he again confirms Japan's unwavering support for the ASEAN regional economic integration and development. Japan is our fourth largest ASEAN trade partner and investor for our region. Of course, with the pandemic, the economic activities, especially trade and investment between Japan and ASEAN, have somewhat softened. Our trade and investment numbers between ASEAN and Japan are now weaker than other ASEAN partners like the US or China for the same period. I'm hoping that this is a momentarily weakened moment, and what all of us in the ASEAN really wish for is for the Japanese businesses to revitalize, to rejuvenate their trade and investment activities and commitments, and come and take advantage of the region's competitive growth. As a whole, ASEAN region has gone through a lot of challenges the last 2 years, but the region has also started to recover very well in 2021. In fact, the region as a whole, we are now, by the middle of this year, we will be able to hit a 70% vaccination achievement for our population. And we anticipate that the GDP growth for the ASEAN region for 2022 is once again going to be positive, despite the challenges that we are beginning to see hovering over Europe and Ukraine. But we still believe that the region as a whole will be able to achieve a growth of between 4 to 5% in 2022. We believe that the coming into force of the RCEP FTA is another potential booster that hopefully will also encourage more Japanese conglomerates and innovators to come forward and establish their presence in our region and to take advantage of the competitive factors of productions, the lower labor costs, and also the growing consumer marketplaces that are hovering in our region. ASEAN, as you know, we are striving to implement a balanced mix of policies for recovery in order to ensure that we sustain our momentum while we are building back better. And we are consolidating our efforts, especially on digitalization and sustainability, which we see as extremely crucial if we want to achieve long-term sustainable development for our people. Now, these are two areas that we very much welcome Japan's support, especially in terms of technology knowledge, in areas of financing, in the areas of capacity and people development. On this note, I would like to talk about a little about our expectations for a stronger ASEAN-Japan cooperation moving forward. Hopefully, this will also kind of help us build together a much more collaborative, stronger partnership in the coming years. I'd like to suggest that ASEAN and Japan work towards 3 areas. First, a stronger partnership for digital economy, I feel, is most critical. Now, this is, as you know, there is already discussions that have begun on connecting Japanese trade facilitation customs towards the ASEAN single window digital platform, on which all the 10 ASEAN member countries are already digitally connected. I think we need to aspire more. Nothing really stops the two sides to begin studying in the midterm the strengthening of our digital partnership, potentially even studying on proposing a digital agreement between the ASEAN region and Japan. In this current period of digital partnership, I believe it could also include Japan coming in and studying carefully our interest to implement the Bandar Sri Begawan roadmap. As you know, this roadmap, it covers capacity building, investments into very critical areas that I see lots of affinity with Japan. We are going to be covering areas like digital identification. We are going to be covering implementation of paperless trade. We are going to be strengthening under this initiative cross-border payments digitally. We will be touching on health and medical technologies. Now, coupled with the Bandar Sri Begawan roadmap, digitalization, and also the wider fourth industrial revolution of 4IR initiatives are also a priority right now for ASEAN. And we believe that through the digital transformation brought about by our own efforts that we are planning, the region is truly focusing to set up a foundation for a competitive and inclusive and a sustainable digital ASEAN community. And we believe that in that journey of ours, Japan can play a very critical role to support our growth. I would like to highlight that a number of these priorities, the two priorities that I mentioned, the BSBR and also the ASEAN 4IR strategy, they all underscore the importance of innovation acceleration. And at the same time, they also are touching on environmental sustainability. Such innovations may come in the form, for example, for environmental sustainability, things like drone technology, things like Internet of Things, things like big data or cloud computing. I think these are areas in which, for example, we are also touching on things like using of space technology for track and traceability, the use of blockchain for audit technologies that will be needed for us to track a low carbon footprint for our economies. I think these are areas where, again, we clearly see the ability for Japanese institutions and the Japanese private sector to come and work with us in the region. Second, let me talk about the second area of cooperation. I think this is in the area, the partnership for innovation and sustainability. I feel it should be in the area of the use of sustainable technologies and the redirecting of public and private funds for sustainable infrastructure and green industries. What I want to assure all of you here is that ASEAN has developed various policies and frameworks and initiatives on sustainability, particularly touching on energy, transport, and the agriculture sectors. Moreover, all of the ASEAN member states are now committed to reducing carbon emissions under the Paris Agreement for climate change. And there is also a commitment towards adopting economic models to help them in the decarbonization process. Nevertheless, as you all know, the different levels of development and economic circumstances across ASEAN will make it a unique challenge to implement regional decarbonization initiatives. Now, to address this last year, the ASEAN, the Secretariat, we have actually worked with the ASEAN member states to develop the framework for circular economy for the ASEAN economic community. Hopefully, it will provide the strategic path for our region's transition towards a low carbon circular economy. The broad issue of sustainability, we hope, will help us to shift towards a much more targeted approach towards resource efficiency. We hope that, with this ability for us to move on this framework, we are also going to be equipped in 2022. We are going to be working on coming up with the ASEAN carbon neutrality plan for the first time. Again, this is an area where there could be possible collaboration for ASEAN and the government of Japan and your private sector to come together to help us to plan our carbon neutrality implementation plan. Now, speaking about the Japanese private sector, this brings me to my final third area of focus. I would like to put on the table a possible clear path for deeper, further collaboration, especially one that brings mutual benefits to ASEAN and to our partners like Japan. I would like to suggest that the Japanese private sector, especially your technology and innovative conglomerates, they can come forward and work with us to partner us in helping the ASEAN region to build a professional workforce of the future to support our ASEAN's growth, digital economy, and sustainable development. We are really looking for ways to reskill the ASEAN white-collar mature workers so that they remain relevant and to help them in the digital transformation of the ASEAN private sector. If there are very good digital reskilling initiatives that Japan is rolling out in your economy, we would like to emulate some of these. And we hope to have your Japanese businesses come forward with us and providing opportunities and advice and even resources to help us organize this reskilling. Meanwhile, we also look forward to including collaboration with the Japanese business community to invest in internship programs that will allow the younger ASEAN professionals, including university students, to be trained or to receive internship in Japanese companies in the ASEAN. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize that ASEAN and Japan partnership is really a key to achieving our region's goal of innovation and sustainable development. ASEAN can definitely learn a lot from the experiences of Japan, especially on the implementation of sustainability measures, as well as the adoption of innovative technologies, including digital technologies, which have proven successful in driving and the transition towards a low carbon circular economy. ASEAN needs the support of our partners, especially Japan and your private sector, your policymakers, and the broader public from Japan to ensure the success of our various programs and initiatives for digitalization, sustainability, and circular economy. Only with your support can our goals for successful ASEAN economic integration, we'll be able to achieve that, and our mutual interests for the growth of not just ASEAN, but the whole of Asia will be also achieved. Thank you for having me this morning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sin, for your opening remarks. We are truly grateful and honored for your encouraging words regarding new economic cooperation between ASEAN and Japan. Thank you very much. Now, we would like to invite our next speaker for today, Mr. Ikeya Iwao, Director for Asia and Pacific Division, Trade Policy Bureau, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, METI Japan. And now, Mr. Ikeya, please.
Thank you, Ms. Tada, for giving me the floor. And thank you, His Excellency Satvinder Singh, Deputy Secretary General for ASEAN Economic Community, for your insightful remarks. And my name is Iwao Ikeya, and I'm leading the team at METI for ASEAN-Japan Economic Cooperation. It is my great pleasure that I can have a wonderful opportunity today to share our new initiative with all distinguished guests at this DISG. Today, I would like to explain the overall ideas of Asia-Japan Investing for the Future initiative, which defines a new cooperative relationship between ASEAN and Japan in the economic area, with the keywords of innovation, sustainability, and co-creation, looking into the future of Asia and the Indo-Pacific. This initiative was announced by our Minister Hagiuda during his recent travel to South Asia, and I was in the delegation. Next slide, please. Thank you. First, before I get into detail, let me briefly review the development of the ASEAN-Japan economic relationship. Our modern economic and industrial relationship can be traced back in 1960s. This was led by Japanese auto manufacturers who built factories mainly in Thailand in the first place, which was eventually followed by a large number of other Japanese companies who expanded their production base over ASEAN countries. Currently, more than 14,000 Japanese companies are operating in the ASEAN region. ASEAN and Japan worked intensively not only in hard connectivity of the infrastructure, but also soft connectivity, such as rulemaking in trade and investment, including our RCEP, which entered into force on January 1st this year. The economic relationship between ASEAN and Japan centered around this production network is now changing significantly. One of the keywords is innovation. With expanding middle class and large number of young population in the ASEAN region, as Mr. Singh mentioned, the cases of regional business players turning into great innovators are increasing. Outstanding performance of digital tech startups symbolizes a bright future of the region. Another keyword is sustainability. Addressing climate change and decreasing poverty and securing jobs at the same time is one of the toughest challenges Asia is now facing. Also, there are many other serious issues such as providing transport infrastructure to go along with urbanization, healthcare access for all, and raising agriculture productivity. Many Japanese businesses have a clear recognition of them and a strong will to contribute to solving them. In addition to this current relationship, we can become co-creating partners of innovations with expanding Asian consumption market and can aim for sustainable growth with paying attention to diverse values. We can broaden fields of joint work from factories to cities and over to countryside as well. New relationship between ASEAN and Japan is already taking place in the form of private businesses. For Japanese companies, ASEAN is now a partner to innovate and launch business together. Japan would like to actively promote a future-oriented investment, including human resource, that will help ASEAN member states to build a foundation for sustainable economy and society. We would like to see co-creation where ASEAN and Japan work jointly to create innovation. Such ideas are expressed as AJI-Japan Investing for the Future initiative, or to make it short, AJIF or AJIF. Through this initiative, we hope to further deepen our economic relationship. And now I would like to explain 3 important principles of AJIF. Please look at the upper box of the slide. First is realism. Look at the reality of each country sincerely and offer effective solutions to each issue. Second is innovation and sustainability. Use private sector's innovation to the maximum extent and create the foundation for sustainable economic society. And of course, there is a financial limit to government support. That's why their support should encourage innovative business projects. Third is co-creation of the future. That is, to create the future of the region working with ASEAN as equal and complementary partners. Through the collaboration between ASEAN and Japanese companies. This is the direction that the AJIF is seeking. And please also look at the box at the bottom of the slide. There are 3 ideal images of the future of the ASEAN and Japan. First is to improve attractiveness as a global supply chain hub and take the lead in resilient free trade with trust. Second is that ASEAN and Japan continue to create innovation that enhances sustainability and contribute to solving social issues of the region. And third is that ASEAN and Japan work together to promote energy transition. Next slide, please. Thank you. Here, I would like to emphasize that private sector, not public sector, should be and is significant driving force for innovation and sustainability. Please see the top half of this slide. Each column provides specific details on improving supply chain attractiveness, using innovation to solve problems, and promoting energy transitions. Also, listed in the lower half of the slide are examples of actual projects being undertaken by Japanese companies. In the lower left-hand corner in red, a parts company A is using IoT to train human resources for efficient and lean production. And another example is an electronics manufacturer B. This company is using data to help optimize its entire supply chain across companies. And in the middle column in blue, with regard to solving social issues, a trading company C uses data of more than 400 million patients to provide attentive, patient-centered services rather than hospital-centered services. A startup company B has developed carbon-free raw materials as an alternative to petroleum-based products and is operating a mass production plant in ASEAN. For energy transitions in the right hand in green, the following are some examples of energy transitions. An engineering company E is studying the hydrogen supply chain, and a heavy industry company F is developing technology to co-fire coal and ammonia. Next slide, please. Thank you. In order to realize the three ideal images that I mentioned, Japan will strengthen cooperation in 5 areas, namely supply chain, connectivity, digital innovation, human resources, and green industries. These are the list of representative projects under each of the 3 pillars which Japanese government supports. Now, let me introduce some ongoing projects about supply chain resilience in red and innovation in blue. And with regard to energy transition at the bottom in green, my colleague, Mr. Kobayashi, will later explain recent update on green projects. So I'd like to skip this part. Next slide, please. Thank you. And enhancing the ASEAN's capability as an important hub in global supply chain and increasing its attractiveness is extremely important, not only for ASEAN themselves, but also for a resilient Japanese economy. Stable and predictable ASEAN, who give importance to free trade and multilateralism, offers a high value in an era of uncertainty. In this sense, under the rapid changes in the global business environment, we have learned that disruption risks and the social issues such as decarbonization regarding supply chain can be reduced and handled by end-to-end visualization. Promotion of data utilization is the key to build resilient and competitive supply chain. Therefore, Japan will support efforts to securing the visibility and enhancing risk responding capability of the supply chain by utilizing digital technology. We, METI, have already secured a budget of about $9 million and will establish 100 good cases of supply chain management with the ASEAN and Asian countries in the next 5 years. Next slide, please. Thank you. Over the next 5 years, Japan will support to provide opportunities for 50,000 highly skilled professionals in Asia to seek jobs in Japanese companies in Asia as well as in Japan. There is a data which shows that around 55% of international students studying in Japan seek jobs in Japan after graduation, but only 36% can actually get a job. To bridge this gap, METI will cooperate with other government agencies such as the Ministry of Education in Japan and JETRO. We are not only targeting international students in Japan, we will also support to increase opportunities for students and workers in Asia to work in Japanese companies in Asia. The concept of AJIF is to co-create Asia's growth, and from that viewpoint, it is essential that Asian talented human resources perform at their best, and Japanese companies change themselves and grow together with them. Next slide, please. Finally, I would like to introduce the Asia Digital Transformation projects promoted by METI. METI has been supporting innovative new businesses through co-creation between ASEAN and Japanese companies to accelerate the growth of both sides. Specifically, METI has chosen 40 outstanding projects in the past 2 years, where Japanese companies collaborated with ASEAN companies to provide solutions to social challenges in ASEAN, such as healthcare on the left, agriculture, fisheries, and the lower part of mobility, environment, and manufacturing and human resources. And METI provided around $8 million in total to these 40 projects. In addition to that, we have also secured a new budget of about $7.7 million for new projects, and we will further promote collaboration between ASEAN and Japanese companies for digital innovations in the future. The new application will be accepted around May 2022. If ASEAN companies plan to start new innovative projects with Japanese companies, they can also apply. And finally, let me quickly explain one more update. On January 31st, Japan's Public-Private Fund, Japan Investment Corporation, or JIC, has announced that it will invest $55 million in a promising private fund, which is strong in ASEAN. This risk money will push forward co-creation between ASEAN and Japanese companies. These are the government support that I would like to highlight today, and we will add more support programs in the future. Last but not least, Japan would like to promote future investment and co-create innovative and sustainable economy with ASEAN. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ikeya. You gave us a presentation, very informative presentation on AJIF, introducing overview of AJIF and relevant programs under AJIF, such as Asia DX program. Thank you very much. Now, we would like to invite our next speaker. He is Mr. Abe Ichiro, Director for Trade Promotion Division, Trade and Economic Cooperation Bureau, METI Japan. And now, Mr. Abe, please.
Okay, thank you so much. I am Abe Ichiro, Director of Trade Promotion Division of METI. And thank you so much for the AMEC Secretariat and other people for inviting me to this DISG seminar. And it's my great pleasure to make a presentation regarding our programs to the distinguished guest leaders of Asian countries. So today I would like to introduce two programs. One is the strengthening and diversification of supply chains. And the other one is feasibility study for quality infrastructure. Next page, please. I will start from the strengthening of overseas supply chains program. When you look at the left-hand side picture, for country C, that is maybe Japan, if the country C rely too much on a particular production base in country A, of course, the risk of disruption of supply chain would be high. But the country C has another production base in country B that would mitigate the disruption risks. So let's say country C, Japan, and country A or country B would be any country in ASEAN. From Japan's perspective, this means to strengthen our procurement system and industry base. From ASEAN countries' point of view, this means more direct investment to each countries and enhancement of connectivity to the entire supply chain. So this is a win-win situation for both two regions. So the subsidy program for the capital investment of Japanese companies in ASEAN, and we commenced in 2020 of this program. And the total amount of budget allocated to this program is 35 billion Japanese yen. I think it would be more than 200 to 3 million in terms of US dollars. But anyway, this figure is very big. So normally, the budget allocation to each division of METI is usually like 2 billion, 5 billion yen, up to 10 billion yen. So you can see how much we are keen on this project by look at the figure of 35 Japanese billion yen. Anyway, when you look at the right-hand side pictures, this is the map of the countries adopted by this subsidy scheme. Among 92 projects so far, 90 projects are dedicated to ASEAN regions. The top destination is Vietnam, followed by Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. Next page, please. This is about the examples of sectors supported and examples of the project companies. So examples of sectors are semiconductor related products, automobile related parts, aircraft related parts, and healthcare sectors. And when you look at the right-hand side pictures, for example, semiconductor-related products, those products are widely used in a variety of sectors, such as medical devices, such as manufacturing devices, such as a smartphone, etc. So the target of our subsidies are the upstream kind of industry sectors. So we try to invite investment to those upstream sectors. By doing so, of course, employment opportunities and other many opportunities would follow to those investments. Next slide, please. Next one is the feasibility study for the high quality infrastructure. So MITI tried to contribute to sustainable growth of ASEAN countries through the support of the feasibility study on infrastructure project. There are two pillars. One is relating to upstream of infrastructure development, such as formulation of master plan. And second one is relating to downstream of infrastructure development, such as the subsidies for individual infrastructure projects. Again, in 2021, 38 projects were adopted, and about 60% was the project in the ASEAN area. Next slide, please. From here, I would like to introduce two examples of this feasibility study program. One is the relating to gastrointestinal cancer diagnosis platform in Thailand. So Japanese company is called Fujifilm has conducted feasibility study for the cancer diagnosis platform in Thailand. And this platform is expected to contribute the early detection and medical treatment of GI cancer by introducing endoscopy, which is supported by artificial intelligence. So this endoscopy is supposed to assist doctors and medical workers to make their operation more effective or efficient by providing clear image of organs or by providing big data analysis. The data is collected through endoscopy. So this is a kind of idea to create a platform rather than just selling a particular device. So by creating this kind of platform, we'd like to contribute to the enhancement of well-being of Thailand people. Next slide, please. This is another example of feasibility study, which is ammonia co-filing at coal power station in Malaysia. And of course, we need to tackle with the global warming issues. But in Asia, there are already many power plants, excellent power plants of the thermal coal power plant. Thermal power plant. So replacing the fuel to more friendly, environmental friendly is a good approach. In this context, ammonia is playing a significant role. So Japanese company IHI has conducted feasibility study for ammonia co-filing project at coal power stations in Malaysia. And this study includes evaluating the co-filing technology and economics across the entire supply chain. So the challenges when we introduce ammonia are technologies and supply chain. We need to produce ammonia, we need to transport ammonia, and we need to properly manage ammonia in power plant. So this project covers the entire supply chain in terms of technology, in terms of business feasibility. So we like to create a kind of a network in Asian countries of ammonias. By doing so, of course, we like to contribute the transition of energy in Asia. So this is the examples of our programs. And the idea behind those programs are, like Mr. Ikea said, co-creation, co-working, and co-development with Asian countries. So we focus on the upstream industries, we focus on networks, supply chain. So by doing those activities, we would like to contribute the sustainable development growth of ASEAN. And finally, I would like to announce that regarding the subsidy for strengthening the supply chain, we are now inviting public invitation. The 5th public invitation is going on, starting from January and to end March. So we hope to see many applicants to those projects. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abe, for introducing us relevant programs under AJIF, such as Program for Strengthening Overseas Supply Chain and Feasibility Study Project for Overseas Deployment of High Quality Infrastructure. Thank you so much for your presentation. Next, we would like to invite Mr. Kobayashi Izuru, Deputy Commissioner for International Affairs, Agency for Natural Resources and Energy, METI, Japan. Mr. Kobayashi, please.
Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction. And my name is Izuru Kobayashi, Deputy Commissioner for the Agency of Natural Resources and Energy. Actually, I was in a position of the representative of AMEC Secretariat from 2005 to 2009. So it's my great pleasure to be able to contribute to this very important DISG seminar. And let me start my presentation. Next, please. Well, before COP26 held in November last year, the Asia's in ASEAN's emerging economies announced that they aim for the carbon neutrality. The target year varies from country to country. India in 2070, Indonesia 2060, Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia in 2050. Next, please. To reduce greenhouse gas emissions, actually, European countries and the United States are promoting a single policy scenario. First, early retirement of the coal-fired power plants, and second, introducing renewable energy, especially solar and wind. And however, I would say that this policy could be very difficult to implement and could be less effective in Asia-Pacific region, especially in ASEAN. And there are two main reasons for this. And first, the retirement of coal-fired power plants is a little bit dangerous for ASEAN, where electricity demand is rapidly growing, and the retirement of the coal-fired power plant could create the imbalance of the electricity supply, which can destabilizing the grid management. And also, most of the ASEAN's coal-fired power plants are relatively new, and it costs a lot of money to retire them compared to the very old, obsolete coal-fired power plants in European countries, United States, and actually some other emerging economies like South Africa. It is actually rather relevant to focus on how much intermittent renewables like solar and wind can be introduced without destabilizing the grid, rather than just trying to retire the coal-fired power plants. Another challenge for ASEAN is that the ASEAN solar and wind potentials for the commercially viable projects are relatively small compared to other regions. Wind power, except a few areas in Vietnam, is actually difficult to form commercially viable projects with current technologies. There is enough sunshine for solar power generation in ASEAN region. However, ASEAN has lots of precipitation and a very little dry wasteland. Therefore, it is not so easy to secure a huge land which is needed to produce a very large solar farm. In addition, the solar panels generates only about 10% of the electricity in rainy day compared to sunny days. ASEAN has a good amount of rainfall, and their grid coverage is not so large, especially for archipelago area. So therefore, the introduction of solar power on large scale requires almost 100% backup for rainy days to avoid from the blackouts. That will increase the cost of introduction of solar panels significantly. So all countries, including ASEAN, needs to work to reduce CO2 emissions and make utmost efforts to introduce renewable energies. However, I think it is necessary to keep in mind that the situation in each country is different, and one prescription doesn't work, doesn't always work. Next, please. The Asia Energy Transition Initiative, we called it AETI, was announced in May last year as a concrete support program supported by Japan to realize the realistic energy transition in Asia. At the Asean-Japan Special Energy Ministers meeting in June last year, a minister at that time, Minister Kajiyama, explained AETI to ASEAN ministers and received support from all countries. And those ministers really expressed the great expectations for their future support from Japan. Basically, AETI has 5 pillars. First, support for developing a roadmap for energy transition, develop the guidelines for Asia transition finance, 10 billion funding for the renewable energy and energy saving projects such as LNG and CCS. Support for the technological development and demonstration utilizing the results of the Green Innovation Fund. Lastly, human resource development, knowledge sharing, and formulate standards for decarbonization technologies. Next, please. On October 4th of 2021, Asian countries, including ASEAN member states and the United States, Australia, India, and Middle Eastern countries, attended the first Asia Green Growth Partnership Ministerial meeting. We call it AJIF. At the meeting, ministers and representatives of international organizations pointed out the need to achieve green growth and accelerate realistic energy transitions in order to achieve carbon neutrality globally. They agreed that there are multiple pathways to carbon neutrality, and respective countries would have different better pathways. They also agreed on the importance of promoting innovations and engaging Asian countries rather than just pushing and forcing them to reduce emissions. The Minister emphasized that Japan would provide a wide range of assistance to Asian countries based on AETI in order to accelerate the energy transitions in Asia. And the statement was welcomed by all other countries. The importance of international cooperation for innovation and the need for financing support also stressed at the meeting. Next, please. Well, at COP26, Prime Minister Kishida reiterated that the Japan aim for the carbon neutrality in 2050. He also reiterated that the Japan's NDC, which is 46% reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions in 2030 compared to the 2013 level. In addition to the maximum efforts to reduce domestic emission, he expressed his intention to promote zero emissions in Asia as a whole through financial cooperation and technical support to pursue zero emission thermal power generation consistent with AETI. Next, please. Well, I would like to elaborate a little about the status of AETI, as Ikeya-san mentioned in his presentation. First, development of the roadmap for the carbon neutrality. As for this project, AREA and IEEJ support. IEEJ is the Institute of Energy Economics in Japan, support the respective countries to develop roadmaps to achieve carbon neutrality. So, of course, the roadmap does not need to be just one roadmap, and also ultimately respective governments need to adapt them as their roadmap or roadmaps. And this project is essentially trying to identify a pathway with the lowest emission reduction cost using a linear planning simulation model based on the certain assumptions. The result of the simulation for Indonesia indicated that the thermal power generation should be utilized while pursuing zero emission thermal by the ammonia and the hydrogen co-firing, and in the future mono-firing, and also CCUS should be pursued in addition to the deployment of the renewables and the energy storage systems. The similar results came out for Thailand. And the Thai Ministry of Energy hopes to use this model while changing some assumptions and do their own analysis. And for this reason, Japan has decided to invite Thai officials from the Ministry of Energy to IEJ for the necessary training. Japan also set up a 100 million subsidy program to support a demonstration of technologies for realistic energy transitions, such as coal ammonia firing. In Indonesia, a feasibility study of ammonia coal firing at the Suralaya coal-fired power plant will be launched soon. With regard to transition finance in Asia, Mitsubishi UFJ and other Japanese banks established a study group in which more than 20 banks from Europe, the United States, and Asia participate. An interim report will be issued in April 2022, the Appellate Forum, which will be held on the 25th of April this year. The final report would be issued at the second AJIF scheduled in September this year. The Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, the Ministry of Finance, the Financial Service Agency of Japan, and governments of other countries are participating in the study group as the observers. the report would be utilized to define the project under the 10 billion energy transition program, which was mentioned before. Of course, we are also promoting cooperation for the renewables, grid management, energy storage, and energy conservation. Through policy dialogues with Asian countries, we explore deepening communication, identifying cooperation needs, and trying to come up with the relevant projects. Next, please. Okay, next, please. Okay, let me touch on what the project under the supported by AETI's 10 billion US dollars commitment. And as I mentioned earlier, in order to realize a realistic transition in Asia, it is necessary to introduce renewable energies and promote energy conservation as much as possible. And at the same time, as it is likely that the thermal power has to be used in Asia, not only now, but also in the future, pursuing the decarbonization of the fossil fuels in the future is very important. So if countries want to shift from the developing coal-fired power plants to something, natural gas might have to be used as less carbon-intensive alternatives. Therefore, this commitment covers all introduction of renewables, energy conservation, grid management, energy storage, decarbonization of fossil fuel by hydrogen, ammonia, co-firing, CCUS, and introduction of LNG, and so on. Perhaps the important point is that these projects need to be consistent with the roadmap of respective countries to achieve carbon neutrality at the relevant timing. Next, please. In January of this year, Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry, Minister Hagiuda visited Indonesia, Singapore, and Thailand to sign a memorandum of cooperation with respective energy ministers in each country to promote cooperation based on AETI. And the next, please. Respective MOCs very much stressing the importance of designing realistic energy transitions, and all elements that I explained are included in the MOC. Next, please. And finally, let me touch on the future events related to AETI. The AJIF Public-Private Forum will be held on April 25. And the second Asia Green Growth Partnership Ministerial Meeting, AJGPM, will be held on September 26th of this year. We are looking forward to welcoming your participation to each of the events. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kobayashi, for your presentation on Japan's support for energy transition in Asia, introducing us overview and progress of AETI. And we are actually currently around 15 minutes late than the actual fixed time schedule. So is that okay for all the presented for the speakers? Is that okay for you? Thank you so much for your cooperation. And next, we would like to invite all three speakers and move on to Q&A session. So Mr. Kobayashi, please keep the video on. Please, thank you very much. And I would like to invite Mr. Ikeya. Thank you very much. And Mr. Abe once again. Mr. Abe, could you put your video on? Thank you very much. And now please send your question to us via Q&A box, and we will do our best to answer both the question you asked in advance when you registered and also the question you will ask in the Q&A box from now on too. So please feel free to raise your questions. Okay, so first of all, let me start off by asking questions which was pre-registered to each presenter. So the first question is this one. What are the priority areas for Japanese investment in Asia? That's the first pre-registered question. So the question was, what are the priority areas for Japanese investment in Asia? So I think this question goes to Mr. Ikeya, Director for Asia and Pacific Division.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the question. And I'd like to answer your question, what are the priority areas for Japanese investment in Asia? And as I explained, we believe that there are 5 important priority areas for the future investment. I mean, the supply chain, connectivity, and digital innovation, human resources, and green industries. And Japan has invested a lot in these areas and would like to continue to work together with the ASEAN countries. This is a short answer, but this is my answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ikeya. So that was the first question. And our next pre-registered question, I guess it goes to Mr. Kobayashi, Deputy Commissioner for International Affairs Agency for Natural Resources and Energy. So the question is, may I know if renewable energy will be included in AETI? So Mr. Kobayashi, could you please answer this question?
Oh, thank you for the question. Actually, as I explained in my presentation, they are under the coverage of AETI. And the project needs to be inconsistent with the roadmap for the carbon neutrality of respective countries. And if they do not have the roadmap, it needs to be consistent with their plan, how to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. As far as these conditions are met, they can be included in the AETI's support.
Thank you so much for answering the question, Mr. Kobayashi. And moving on to our third pre-registered question. So the question is for Mr. Ikeya. So new economic, it needs a local wisdom leadership synergy. Synergy is word for me. So new economic, it needs a local wisdom leadership synergy, isn't it? So this is a question. So Mr. Ikeya, could you please answer to this question?
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for the question. And I think this is a really good viewpoint. The wisdom of each local country is very indispensable for the creation between ASEAN and Japan, especially solving social issues. So this is consistent with our AJIF. This is very consistent with the concept of AJIF. And would like to promote specific projects such as digital transformation projects. Thank you.
Thank you so much for answering the question, Mr. Ikeya. So now let's move on to live Q&A session from now on, answering questions from the viewers audience, which is right from Q&A box just now. So let me check the question. I will start off from this question. So this question, this is the anonymous question. How can ASEAN companies be involved in AJIF? How can ASEAN companies be involved in AJIF? This question goes to Mr. Ikeya.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for asking me a lot of questions from all over the world. And the concept of AJIF is that ASEAN companies and Japanese companies work together and co-create an innovative and sustainable economic society. So if you don't know any good Japanese business partners yet, consulting with JETRO is an effective option that you can take. JETRO has a lot of experiences and a worldwide network, and a great advisor waiting for you in each office, I believe. If you already have a good Japanese business partner, I would say that you should apply for many programs such as digital transformation projects, and METI will strongly support joint work between ASEAN companies and Japanese companies. Thank you.
Thank you so much for answering the question. You should definitely contact JETRO first. Thank you very much. Okay, so I will continue to ask the question from the viewers. Okay, so this question is a little bit long, but let me read it. The question is from Miss, I think it's Miss Diana Noor Izati. So my name is Izati. I'm psychology student from Indonesia, Open University, and always amazed at the beauty of Japan. Thank you very much. I feel like it's easy to find a STEM. I guess it's STEM, S-T. Yes, now you can see the question. So I feel like it's easy to find a STEM-focused study scholarship, but I can't find a social humanity-focused study scholarship. I wish Japan be more open with social humanity-focused program study because we have to stabilize both STEM, STEM, and social humanity study to apply an innovative, inclusive, and sustainability Earth. Thank you. This was her message and also the question, I guess. So, Mr. Ike, if you can answer to this question, could you please answer also?
Thank you very much. And thank you for the question. And frankly speaking, I'm not an expert about this kind of scholarship program, but personally, I used to live in Indonesia for 3 years, since 2013 to 2016, as a counselor in Japanese embassy in Jakarta. And based on my experience, my advice is you should consult our Japanese embassy in Jakarta. And there are many staff, and you can find a person who is in charge of this kind of like scholarship issues. And I guess we have a lot of programs. And if not, I think they could also introduce other scholarships in the private sector. So please contact the Japanese embassy in Jakarta. That's my advice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ike, for answering the question, this one as well. So definitely contact Japanese embassy in Indonesia first and foremost. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's keep on answering the question. There's so many questions coming up. So this should be the question that you can answer. Okay, so when will the sixth and subsequent public offering of the program for strengthening overseas supply chain begin? In the future, how many times do you plan to do public offering of this program? That was a question from, I guess it's Mr. Jomar Teo. So Mr. Abe, could you please answer this question?
Yes, thank you for showing your interest to the supply chain subsidy. At this moment, we have not decided whether we should go to the 6th round of public invitations. Now we are working on the 5th round of invitation. So we need to see how many applications we will receive and how many projects among the applications would be eligible for the subsidies. And of course, how much budget we need to consume for the offerings in the 5th round of invitation. So after we go through this process, if still we have a budget, we will consider whether we should go to the 6th round of offer. So we hope to invite many applications for 5th round of invitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abe, for answering the question regarding a subsequent public offering of the program for strengthening overseas supply chain. Thank you so much for answering the question. There's still so many questions happening right here on Q&A box, but we are running out of time, so we have to finish this Q&A session this time. So this concludes the Q&A session. Thank you, audience, for all your questions, and thank you so much, all the speakers, for answering the question. Thank you very much. So thank you, all the distinguished speakers. And now I would like to thank you, everyone, for joining us. We reached our webinar time limit. And in addition, the questionnaire will be shown when you leave this webinar, and the Secretariat will also send the questionnaire to everyone after this webinar. We will be grateful if you could answer so that we can reflect your opinions on webinar in the future. Those who answer will receive presentation slides later. And for your information, you can register the mailing list that regularly sends DISG activities and webinar information from this QR code here. And now looking forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Thank you very much.